Hey runners, today I'm excited to have as a guest one of our local trail runners, Ben Meade. He just completed the Cocodona 250-mile trail race. Ben had a very interesting experience that had us on the edge of our seats. So stay tuned for his inspiring story. Welcome to the Forever Runner podcast. I'm your host, Herb the Forever Runner. I'm a heart attack survivor, ultra runner, and longevity coach for runners over 50. Listen in each week as we discover how to master your running to enjoy an active lifestyle as you age. If you want to learn more, head to foreverrunner.com for my free quick start guide. But for now, let's dive into today's episode. So, Ben is part of our Ole Trail Runners community here in Olympia, and he's also the host of Chasing Cutoffs podcast, where he shares back of the pack stories. So I had no idea he was planning on the Cocodona 250 until we ran Devil's Gulch 50 miler a little over a year ago. At that race, it was like brutally hot with like a 30% drop rate, including me. But Ben persevered and got it done. So he was on a mission. So let's bring him on and see what's all this. So let's bring him on and see what all of this is about. Okay, here we got Ben Meade, our famous Ole Trail runner who just completed the Cocodona 250.
That's right.
And that's
And I've
250 miles race over several days. Um, so Ben, what we were talking about before is uh, we ran the Devil's Gulch 50 miler race a little more than a year ago, like last July.
Mhm.
And that's when you kind of mentioned to me that this is what you're up to, which was really a shock because you hadn't really raced a lot before then. And
Yeah.
you're hopping into this very difficult 50 miler, and it ended up being really hot. And, 30% of us dropped out, including
Yeah.
me. And you just hung in there and got her done. And uh,
Yeah.
so I,
And
I
I got
was
it
I was
done
thinking,
most.
yeah, he might be up for this. So what kind of got you thinking about doing such a crazy race in the first place?
Yeah, there's I think there's kind of three factors, and one is like a very personal why, and I'm still sort of formulating how I articulate that, and maybe I'll do that in the future. But the other two factors were I'm 49. I'm going to turn 50 this year, and I
Woo-hoo.
definitely wanted to do something epic for my 50th kind of year on this planet. So, and I know that's an awesome theme on this podcast
Yeah.
of being a forever runner. But to your point, if you go and look at my ultra sign up, which doesn't reflect every race I've done, but it reflects most of them, and I have not done a lot of races. Um, so the history there is that I started running when I was about 35 and had no athletic background at all, period, nothing. I did, t-ball or whatever, right, when I was like a little kid, but um, I was not an athlete. And by 35, I was about 35, 40 pounds overweight. I was a total couch potato, desk jockey, no athletics at all. I got really inspired to run because my wife was running, and I got to kind of watch her experience the whole 5K and then the 10K and then the half marathon and the marathon on the road. It was really, really inspiring to me. And I liked like the vibe around racing and things like that on the road. And so I started running myself and listening to the very, couple, running podcasts that were out there at all at that time. This is a long time ago. And so I get into running, and over time, you start to obviously you're making gains if you're starting from zero. So I made a lot of gains and I lost a little weight, and I got up to the point, now I'm like 36, 37, and I'm able to fairly consistently put down these 10-minute, 11-minute miles on the road. And I kind of hit a wall where I was like, man, why can't I get faster? And so that like dominated my thought process for a really long time.
Yeah, that's real
Was
common.
yeah, why can't I get faster? And I just couldn't make any gains. Now, granted, I didn't hire a coach or anything like that, but I tried to follow various training plans and things, and it just kind of stagnated. And my love for the road stagnated a bit until I talked to a friend who said that they had run this race called the Hillbilly Half. And I'm sure you're very familiar with the Hillbilly Half. I don't think that one's still going, but on the road. But it was like off road, like on a trail. And my mind was blown. I'm like, you did that locally, a half marathon, but it was not. And he's like, yeah, and it was really steep and it was crazy. And something like really turned in my brain. And that was the genesis of me trying to run. And I went out to our local Squaxin Park, I think was the first time I ever tried to run on a trail. And it kind of the process began again, right? So now I had a little bit of a running background, but I had to learn all over again about the trails.
Right.
And I learned kind of how to trail run, and I start doing larger and longer adventures. And I think my first trail race was a 10K, where just to give you some context, right? This is probably 8 years ago. It was a 10K at Point Defiance in Tacoma, and I went out with the leaders.
Oh.
Ben Meade, went out with the leaders.
Ah,
And after 1K, I was so destroyed and so distraught that I couldn't keep up with them because I'm like, look, man, I've been training. I feel like I want to, I just really, really wanted to run at the front. And it was just a huge slap in the face, right? And I probably wound up finishing close to last. And I was really depressed about it. And I was really down. And this process went on for a while
yeah.
where I loved the trail running, but I was so frustrated with my speed. And it took me time to accept my speed, which is pretty damn slow. And it also took me time to appreciate that when I did jump into races, albeit a 50K here or there, was kind of my max at that around, the last 3 or 4 years. When I did jump into races, I actually had a great experience at the back of the pack with the other back of the packers. Like it was kind of a fun
Yeah.
experience being back there. So not only did I accept it, I began to embrace it. Um, and somewhere around a year and a half ago now, um, I wouldn't say I made a decision, but I got this idea about Cocodona specifically. And I'll tell you why. It's because I've realized over time, due to my speed, that there are very few epic, super interesting, incredibly beautiful 100-mile races that I can beat the cutoffs.
Right. Yeah.
There are some special ones where you can get 100 miles if you just keep doing this 3-mile loop over and over and over or whatever, but it's not particularly like mind-blowingly cool race, right?
Right.
The cutoffs are speed at the 100K and 100-mile distance. And so I'd always intended to do those. And when I began to discover the 200-mile race distances, and I started seeing videos produced by some of the early runners of Cocodona, like West Plate, who's, quite famous for putting out his race videos. I saw that he looked like me. And B, I saw that he was doing a lot of hiking. So, and I started looking into Cocodona specifically because of, again, like a whole like sort of like deeply personal why about the state of Arizona and family and all this stuff. But and I started researching the cutoffs and I was like, you know what? I can't run a 100-mile race and beat the cutoffs. Not any one that I would want to run.
Yeah.
Not any of the famous cool ones that you've done, like Cascade Crest, et cetera. And I'm not putting shade on them. I just can't do it. But I think I can do this. And so I really started doing a mindset shift toward the 200 plus mile distance and towards specifically toward Cocodona, which had really captured my imagination.
Yeah, that's amazing. And you know, that's such a hard thing to do for runners to uh, accept what type of runner they are
Hmm.
and to adapt and enjoy it. So that's fantastic that you just kind of settled in on what you can and can't do and then search for an adventure that would work for you. That's so cool.
Yeah, and then going back to I think it was less than a year ago, technically, when you and I did Devil's Gulch in the summer. But I was very fortunate at that race that it was a two-loop race for the 100-mile runners. So it was a 53-mile loop, and you had to do it twice if you're running 100 miles. And at the beginning of the race director said, if you're running the 50 miler, as I was, um, the cutoff is the 100-mile cutoff, right? If you can get around once in the time that they can get around twice, you're good to go. And I thought I can do that. And I'll take you to it's really awesome having dinner with you the night before and kind of chatting through that and telling you about Cocodona. But that was an incredibly hot day, very, very difficult race in the first place. And then it was like super, super, super hot. But the thought that kept occurring to me is if I can't do this, I can't do Cocodona. And I remember leaving the last major aid station at 9 p.m. Um, and I learned a lot of lessons on this race about foot care, really, really good learning lessons. But I remember leaving there at 9 p.m. I'm totally by myself. I mean, I'm going to be DFL by hours, right, at this point um, for that race. And at least that's what was in my head. I think there actually was one person behind me. But I went off into the night, and this was the first time, not that I had run into the dark, but by the time I finished at close to 3 a.m., the sun was starting to peak up, right? So this was really kind of my very first like fully overnight run, which
Yeah.
sounds so ridiculous to say in a 53-mile race that I finished in like 22 hours or something like that. Um, but I'm really proud of that finish, and it was like the biggest learning lesson that I had probably in prep for Cocodona was that one. That was a huge milestone.
Yeah, that was pretty amazing. I mean, just to be able to hang in there and just push through, and and like you said, one of the coolest things of running through the night on a 100 miler is when the sun starts coming up because
Yeah.
everything changes. So you get to start to experience a little bit of that. But let's
Most people don't do that in a 50 miler, but yeah,
yeah,
yeah. I think I went back and calculated that I had spent somewhere around 4 to 4.5 hours at aid stations in that race. And it's partially because I knew I could because of the cutoff situation, but it's also because it was incredibly hot. And again, I was just learning how to manage my feet. I had never really experienced blisters or anything like that before that race. And um, yeah, good memories.
yeah. So so what was the final build up to the start? Did you
Well, I think probably the most pivotal thing that I did was back in September. I hired a coach, so that was pivotal. And I hired Alicia, the coach formerly known as Alicia Jenkins, now known as Alicia Brower, who I highly recommend. She was an incredible asset to my team. I would not have finished Cocodona without the coaching because she put together a training plan that I even though I had been running for a decade, I never would have imagined half the stuff that she told me to do. And in that buildup, I did a few other races. Even in that buildup, Herb, I got cut off and DNF'd in Ole Trail Runners 50K, right? That was part of the buildup. So,
yeah,
and I
we're
just
cruel
had,
and heartless, aren't we?
yeah, I just had to accept that was gonna be the case. You know what I mean? That was a really tough race. That was the Capitol Peak, I think it was. I can't remember, but we didn't go to the peak because it was too snowy and it was an out and back and it was incredibly muddy. And but throughout that process, I did an additional 50K, the Lord Hill 50K up north, where I finished DFL. But that was also a huge accomplishment for me because they had a 9 hour cutoff, and I'd never finished a 50K in under 10 hours ever in any other race. So there was a real testament to my training and to the speed that I had been able to pick up through doing hundreds and hundreds of hill repeats and strides and all the things that Alicia was having me do, in addition to the strength training and all the really big weeks. So my biggest week, which, to some of your listeners is going to be laughable, and I'm sure you've done 3 times this in any given week, but I spent 30 hours on my feet on my peak week for training for Cocodona. I did 82 miles that week, and
Wow.
I
Yeah.
did 16,800 feet of vert in a single week. So that was the peak week before I began the taper. And again, that whole training block included like 3 races and just weekend after weekend of back-to-back runs. And a lot of the specificity in the training was not only just the running in itself, but it was also a lot about the first 35 miles of Cocodona. Because as most people know, the first 35 miles of Cocodona is incredibly difficult. There's a 25-mile section of it with no aid. You're climbing 10 to 12,000 feet of vert in that first 50K. And they were, because of that, because it's so hot and you're starting in the Sonoran Desert just north of Phoenix, it's so hot, it's so exposed, it's so difficult. They have a requirement that you carry a minimum of 4 liters of water.
Or
Some
lead.
people 4 liters. Some people do 6. Some people do, more.
Wow.
I wound up carrying 5 liters of water. So you do that plus all of my gear. And I was in the 17 to 18 pound range. And so going back to that training specificity, knowing that's what I was up against, many of my Saturday and Sunday back-to-back long runs, I had that pack with all that water.
Okay.
And I did that week after week after week until I could just get used to carrying 15, 16, 17 pounds, and doing, 20 to 30 miles Saturday, followed by 20 to 30 miles Sunday, all with that same crazy heavy pack.
Awesome.
Yeah.
Awesome. So how'd you feel at the start line? Were you um, nervous, excited, confident, scared
Uh,
shitless?
I felt it was a combination of 2 feelings. It was like my dream is coming true, but also due to some very last minute unforeseen circumstances, I felt really nervous. So I'll keep this part short, but um, I had successfully assembled a team of 4 pacers, 2 of which are coworkers of mine, which is really special, and 2 of which were either one of the gentlemen, Mike Snyder, Moose, was a former guest on my podcast, Chasing Cutoffs, and the other guy, Brian Booth, who's a Flagstaff native, was a podcast fan, and so they were 2, and then I had 2 co-workers that were jumping in who live relatively close, who are both athletes that jumped in to pace me, and then my wife was going to be my crew chief, drive the vehicle, aid station to aid station, etc. If anyone who is listening to this is thinking about running Cocodona and you want to do crew and you want to do pacers and you're starting to get really frustrated and puzzled by all the logistical challenges, reach out to me because I've kind of solved all the problems now. But it was a lot of planning, and it was a lot of logistical challenges to overcome to figure out how do we kind of, I had the opportunity to think it through for months and months and months. So how do we like take care of and show gratitude to these pacers when they're out there? Um, as well as how do we just like make sure that my wife is able to meet me at these strategic locations and what's all the gear that we need and everything that you would do going into a race like this. So just for some context, the race is Monday. the previous Thursday, I got a call late at night from one of my two kids. Both my kids are out of the house. I'm an empty nester. They're both successful adults out in the wild. Got a call from one of my kids who was suffering from a medical crisis, and it was pretty serious. Um, and you start to question at that point if if you're even going to go to the race at all, right? It's only a few days away.
Wow, yeah.
Over the course of that evening and then into Friday, um, we came to the decision that my kid was stable enough and healthy enough that I could still race, and I should still race after everything I had put into it, but that my wife was not going to travel to Arizona. And that was the decision that we made, was the right decision. I don't regret that at all. But what it meant that was that all of our planning was out the window. I don't have a crew anymore. And I now have four pacers who no longer have their logistical transportation stuff worked out. So Saturday afternoon, I get a text from one of my pacers. Her name is Angela, an incredible person. And she says, "Hey, I'm switching roles. I'm going to be your crew chief."
Oh, cool.
And unprompted, super grateful for this occurring. So I'm flying out there on Sunday morning and typing this really long note about like how to crew, right? We meet up at the start line, we go over the logistics. The thing about Angela is I knew she was going to be my strongest athlete as a pacer, and she was going to do three distinct sections, all roughly 20 miles each. But I had no idea what to expect from her as a crew chief. And I also knew now that more than likely she would not be pacing me. So those three sections wouldn't be paced, but at least I'd have crew, etc. So when I'm standing on the start line, Herb, I'm thinking about my kid. I'm wondering if I'm going to get that call, like, "Hey, you need to come back home," which I was prepared for. I'm thinking about the fact that the night before, I completely changed everything from having all the gear in a car to sorting everything out into going all drop bags. Because by going all drop bags, I took a lot of pressure in logistics off of Angela, who was just stepping in out of the blue, right? So you're just like literally sorting everything out, which is like, and you're doing it the night before. It is so stressful, right? But then I get to the start line, the sun is coming up, and I'm like, I'm living my dream. I'm here. I was so excited, and it was a really, really beautiful morning. And yeah, that's how I was feeling on the start line that morning.
Oh, that's great. Man, yeah. Why not throw Mickey in at the last minute on one of the most difficult logistic nightmares in the first place?
Exactly.
Well,
And
that's good. That's great that you managed to sort all that out and keep your sanity so you could at least start.
I kept my sanity. I started, and yeah, it was exciting. It was a really exciting start. It was not long before the field spread out a bit. You know, at the very, very beginning, you're going uphill, a little bit of a conga line, but it wasn't long before the field really spread out. And then the first aid station is at roughly mile 7.5. And I did extensive planning. And this this is important context because I did extensive planning with some really cool spreadsheets where you have every segment from aid station to aid station inputted in the spreadsheet with how many miles in between, the vert, and the inputs that you can put in are your estimated pace between aid stations for every segment. Second input that you can put in is how long you intend to rest at the end point.
Right.
And when you plug all that in and you plug in the cutoffs, which is incredibly important to me, you start to get a sense of how long you can rest somewhere. So this was meticulously planned, where I was going to sleep, how long I was going to sleep, what time I plan to arrive, when I plan to leave. And even though we had to change up the crew plan, the plan was still intact. And so I'm doing that first 50K with an understanding that I needed to hit at under 32 minutes per mile. And you might think, well, how do you even run that slow, right? Well, you're not really running because you're climbing this insane mountain range called the
Right.
Bradshaw Mountains, and it's hot and it's exposed and all that
Yeah.
stuff. Um, and that is when only 20 miles into the race with I'm thinking now there was two people behind me. So I'm third from the back, which I'm not sweating at all because I'm putting down 20-minute miles, 27-minute miles,
Right.
28-minute miles. I'm feeling really good. I'm like, yes, every mile I'm under 32. I get to mile 20 or so, and I notice an individual on the side of the trail, laying on the ground in the shade, which is not extraordinary. That is actually not all that weird. In a race like this, dirt naps are really common. Taking breaks is really common. Um, I just had this feeling that it just felt early to me to be down on the ground like that. So I did jog past this individual, but something in me just said, just check. So I just said, hey, are you good? And a series of events occurred that are this individual's story to tell. And I'm not going to tell that person's story, but needless to say, they were not good. And not only were they suffering from a health crisis, somehow over the course of the first 20 miles, their phone had died. And we were kind of prepped for the fact that we would have very little cell service in this first 50K. Um, and that was true, but I was very, very fortunate that I was able to get a signal in this spot. So I reached out to Race Command, and you can text Race Command and tell them what's going on. And I explained the situation. They explained that one or possibly even both of the runners that were behind me were currently being medically evacuated,
Oh, wow.
and that it was going to be some time before the medics could arrive. Instructions of how to care for this person, but they specifically asked me to stay. They asked me to stay with that person, and I did. And I was there for 2 hours. And I was glad to do it. And they needed my help, and I provided my help. And 2 hours later, the medics had not yet arrived, but the sweeps had arrived. This is how I know that the people behind me were no longer on the course.
Right.
So I texted Race Command. They gave me an ETA on medic, but they said, go ahead and leave that person with the sweeps. You can move forward now in the race. And I immediately, and just for context, like I have a search and rescue background. I did that for about 3 years here locally. So like I have no regrets at all about staying with this person. They really did need my help, and I was happy to help them. But as I was progressing, things just started to come into my brain, and I went into a very dark mental place at that point because my pace, my plan, um, I was hoping to sleep an hour and a half, maybe 2 hours that night. Um, I knew that it was all gone. And I started writing my Strava title for the activity, which was over before it really began, right? But I was able to, because of my experience and because of I've been chasing cutoffs my entire trail running career at this point, I was able to rally in my brain and say, you know what? I'm here. I feel great. I'm doing well. I can hit these paces. I'm just going to try to get to Lane Mountain, right? And which I probably still had 15 miles to go.
Uh-huh.
It's getting dark. Every single runner ahead of me is at least 2 hours ahead at this point, right? So
Yeah,
let me
we're
run in
we're
this
watching your
thing.
little dot on the course, you know. You go, ah!
I'm be running this thing solo. So I finally get up there to Lane Mountain, and I had convinced myself that I would be lucky if they were even still there, right? Of course they were there. There's like 5 volunteers there. Not only are they there, there's another runner there who's dropping from the race. Not, not only were they there, they had literally every supply, every bit of food you could possibly imagine was still there for me as the final runner. I get resupplied, and I head down to the next aid station, which is quite famous, which is Crown King, which is only 4.5 miles away or so. And I get in, he's leaving, he's on his way out. But I'm not alone because I had kind of convinced myself, I had this thought, Herb, that, okay, I am going to run 230 miles by myself and I'm never going to see another runner. That's kind of like,
Right.
these are like the negative thoughts, right? I'm like, how am I
Right.
going to do this? But there was someone there and we said hello and he took off and, there again, that aid station there at Crown King was completely stocked. I had all the attention of about 10 people who wanted to do nothing but help me, right? So I did my very first sock change and everything there on my own, and had my drop bag there, of course, as I explained. And on I went through the night, um, aid station after aid station, cutoff after cutoff. And I was beating all these cutoffs at Lane Mountain and at Crown King, Arasta Creek, all night long by about 10 minutes. I'm beating the cutoffs by about 5 to 10 minutes in each one, but I'm still able to get in,
Yeah.
get some food, get refill my water, thank the volunteers. Everyone is great, and I'm out of there. I see my very first sunrise, after a very what felt like a very long and lonely night, in which I experienced my first bout of like some serious hallucinations because I didn't sleep at all that night.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I had never experienced hallucinations in a race before, so that was a unique experience. The sun is up, and I'm starting to knock off these aid stations, and I'm also starting to come across other runners over time. And I get into this place called Camp Kippa, um, in the early afternoon. And as I'm approaching Camp Kippa, I'm kind of in the way outskirts of Prescott at this point. And I got a text from the race director. And he said, "Hey, no pressure, not an emergency or anything, but when you get a chance, give me a call." And I'm thinking, well, I've got nothing better to do. I'm just running my heart out over here. So
Right.
I call race director Steve Adderholt, shout out Steve, who's amazing. And he said, "Hey, I want you to know we're thinking about you and how much we appreciate what you did for your fellow runner. And I do not want you to give me an answer right now, but we have a plan for you. And if it comes down to it, if there becomes a point where you are beating cutoff after cutoff after cutoff, which is what I want you to do, I want you to keep pushing and I want you to keep beating these cutoffs." So, but sleep is going to catch up with you. And if there comes a point where you simply cannot keep going, we're giving you an option that we will transport you forward in the race station where you can sleep, and then you can continue from there.
Wow.
Do not, he said, do not answer. I don't want an answer, but this is our way of thanking you for what you did for that runner. We fully recognize that your race has essentially been compromised, right? I'm sure you weren't planning on chasing cutoffs all the way from mile 1 to mile 250 and not sleeping at all. But don't answer me. And I said, okay, thank you. In my mind, I'm thinking, hell no.
Right.
I'm not skipping any part of this course, then I'm not doing the race, right? I mean, what is that? I can't do that. And I'm driving, I'm pumping, I'm pushing, I'm racing so hard. I'm racing my heart out. I get into an aid station called Camp Kippa late afternoon. It's my first opportunity to sleep, and I set my timer for maybe 15 minutes.
Yeah. That's 62 miles.
Yes, 62 miles.
Yeah.
Granted, my longest run ever was 53 miles at Devil's Gulch, right? So I've
Right.
never gone this far before. But I get refueled. I get a maybe 15-20 minute nap where I'm waking myself up with my phone. You don't get to see your crew for until roughly mile 70. So But when I get out of that aid station, I leave with another runner who's a little bit ahead of maybe actually I think he's a little behind me. I can't quite remember, but I start smelling the barn and I'm like, wait a minute. Tonight, Tuesday night, I'm going to see my crew and pick up my first pacer. And I get this rush of adrenaline
Yeah.
and I go tearing down this dirt road, this dirt forest road for a mile and a half. I'm not sure how long I went. It was a long, long way, and it was a very long road, and it was very steep. But I'm clipping off. I'm flying, right? That quote unquote flying at like maybe 12-minute miles or something.
Right. Right.
I just double check my phone to make sure I'm on course, and I am not on course. And I missed a turn, and now I have to turn around and climb
Go up, back
the
uphill.
hill. Yeah. So I find, and I don't have cell service here. So when I'm really getting really close to where that turn is, I get a text from Race Command that says, "Hey, it looks like you're on course." Like, oh, that would have been convenient to get that text like 40 minutes ago. So I lose about 45 minutes, but the other frustrating thing about it is that the sweeps don't realize I'm off course. And this is a really sharp turn, and they have removed the flag, the marking.
Oh,
So I pass it again. And then I finally realize what I'm doing. I get another text and they say, "Hey, we've asked the sweeps to stop. They're a mile ahead of you. They're going to wait for you. A few turns, there's no markings anymore." I finally get past them, and I continue on. But there's like this mental, again, just another setback, another mental, like, 40 minutes. Imagine if I could have slept for 40 minutes, right? I barely slept at all. So I continue to push. I finally get into Prescott that evening and I see my crew. And so here is my crew chief, Angela. She's at Whiskey Row, super, super famous aid station at Cocodona, downtown Prescott, right across from the courthouse. Um, and she's with my buddy Cordell, who's a work colleague. And I work for a very large tech firm, and we're spread out all over the country. Cordell's in Utah, Angela's in Colorado, right? So we have met on multiple occasions, but we don't spend every day together, right? It's all virtual for
yeah.
the most part. So I had this concept in my head when I said things like, "I need you to help me with my feet," which was like, I'll do it, but maybe I could say like, "Can you hand me the Leuko tape or whatever? Can you hand me the socks or whatever?"
Right.
I get in the chair and she immediately takes over. My shoes are coming off. My coworkers are cleaning my feet. And I cannot describe to you how humbling that was. And the tears that are welling up in my eyes, and they shove pizza in my lap and they're like, "Eat." So she is just in like full on take command mode. She gets me to eat. She cleans my feet. I have this whole foot routine with diaper cream and multiple pairs of socks. Everything gets done. They throw me into the sleep station. They set a timer for 30 minutes. They wake me up, and I'm out the door with my buddy Cordell from work. And I have picked up my first pacer. And I was like, wow, that was beautiful. That was humbling. To quote Cordell, he said, "I feel like an apostle," when he was washing my feet. Um, it was beautiful. It was humbling. It was absolutely necessary. I could have spent a half hour just fussing with my feet instead of
Right.
sleeping, right? So this kind of sets the tone for what's going to come over the next few days, because over the next few days, section after section, Angela is there. She's at essentially every aid station. My wife and I didn't even plan for her to be at every aid station, right? I was going to have
Yeah.
drop bags at the overnight stations. She was going to get sleep. Angela is on the fly coordinating pick up and drop off of pacers, adding pacers to my crew, working it out so that multiple people are doing car shuttling so that she can pace me.
Oh,
And absolutely incredible. So I thought she wasn't going to get to pace me. She winds up pacing me for two very long overnight sections, which was really, really appreciated. But really, it all kind of culminates, the first half of my race kind of culminates on Thursday morning when I said goodbye to Angela after her first section. And we have chased cutoffs all the way into this place called Deer Pass. So now we're at mile 147, right? Every single aid station prior, I'm in and out with maybe 5 minutes to spare, 10 minutes to spare.
Yeah, I was watching the sweepers right behind you on the map. Yeah.
Yep, yep. And I was getting in, I was getting out, I was crushing it. I was, that second night and that third night with Angela were my first experiences with dirt naps. I didn't know what to expect. I didn't know how it was going to work. Um, what I learned is you immediately fall asleep, and 1 second later they wake you up and tell you it was 10 minutes, right? So I did several like 10-minute dirt naps, the second night and the third night with Angela. Come to find out later, especially on the third night, we were really pushing the cutoff. So she told me she was giving me 10-minute naps. She was giving me 5-minute naps
Oh,
because she knew we were really, really, really pushing it. So we finally get into mile 147 after, me saying hello and goodbye to Cordell. He's out of there. Hello and goodbye to my friend Mike Moose Snyder, former guest on my podcast. He's out of there, who gets me up and over Mingus Mountain and into Jerome. And, it's just this long journey of never ending cutoff chasing, essentially. Until Thursday morning when I say goodbye to Angela and I need to get myself um, 17 miles, I think, to Sedona. It's Thursday morning. I have had one 30-minute sleep, one 15-minute sleep, and one 40-minute sleep at that point. I'm on my own. I only have a couple minutes to get out of this Deer Pass aid station, so I don't really have time to like take care of business, right? Like there's a lot of
right.
things I needed to do. I'm still in all my night clothes and stuff. I'm all warm, wrapped up, but the sun's coming up. It's getting warm. I get out of the aid station. I probably go a half mile, and I need to take care of business. So there's a lot of things, right? This is just the realities of multi-day ultra running when you're chasing cutoffs. So like you have to get out of the aid station. There's no time to linger in the porta potty, right? So you're digging
Right.
holes in the woods and you're doing everything responsibly. And then I get out of all my warm clothes and then I put on my day clothes and get up my sunglasses. I'm so tired, Herb. And I give myself a nap and I sleep for 10 minutes and I wake up and I realize that my watch is dead.
Oh,
So I don't know what time it is. I mean, I know what time it is by looking at my phone, but I cannot remember because I'm so sleep deprived. I can't remember what the guy said at the last aid station on the distance. I don't know if he said 18, 17, 42. I don't know what he said. So I don't really know the distance to Sedona. And when I wake up from that 10-minute nap, I've convinced myself that I've lost about 50 minutes to an hour. And then I'm only like a half mile away from where I started, right? That probably was not true, but that's kind of the negative headspace that I went into.
yeah, yeah,
And I got this rush. I'm like, I've got this, I've gotten this far. I'm not giving up. And again, it's like the second, like really big adrenaline rush. And that section from Deer Pass to Sedona has like 4,000 feet of climbing. There's a really, really big mountain that you have to climb to get up and over to drop into the town. So I do that climb at lightning speed, quote unquote. I passed 5 people on the climb. Like I am crushing because I'm
ooh,
panicked. Yeah,
yeah,
I'm panicked basically. But when I get to the top of the climb and I get sort of like where we're starting to descend and the rocks are turning red and you're seeing like Sedona vibes, it's like the central governor, I don't know what you would call it, like in my brain, my amygdala, I don't know, just said, okay, we are done. You have deprived yourself of sleep long enough and your race is over and you will not continue. And I tried to fight through that. I took another 10-minute nap and I woke up and I'm just like, I'm I'm weaving on the trail, right? I'm barely moving. I take another 10-minute nap and then I get up and I get overwhelmed with emotion because as I've been laying there, all the people I pass have passed me. Sweepers are not far behind. I don't know if I have 12 miles to go or 2 miles to go. I just don't know.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and what I do know is that my race is over. And I call my wife and I am bawling my eyes out, snot, the whole thing, because it's very difficult to control your emotions when you're that sleep deprived. And I made no attempt to control my emotions. And it's funny in retrospect because um, she's bawling her eyes out, right? She's saying things like, I just want you to come home safe. And um, we're so proud of you, no matter how far you get, right? I'm probably at mile one in knowing.
Yeah, it's
Um,
like Sedona is like mile 160.
exactly. And I don't
Yeah.
know where I am and I don't know how far it is. And I said, call Angela and tell her that I'm going to lay down and that my race is over and that I don't know if I'm going to be down for 2 hours or 3 hours, but whatever I have to do, I cannot physically go on. So again, for context, it starts Monday morning. It is now Thursday afternoon, and I've slept maybe 3 hours
Yeah.
total. And I've never done this before, right? So I have no experience with this. I lay down under this tree in the shade, and I am not kidding you, no less than 5 minutes later, who should pop out of the woods? Angela.
Holy cow.
And for context, Angela is like a decade plus like backcountry search and rescue person. Like she's an excellent, excellent, excellent uh, athlete and outdoors person. And she sees me, snot, blood, everything, right? And she's like, do you need a minute? Do you want some alone time? And I said, no, 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 it's okay. It's okay. And she said, I think you're going to be surprised at how close you really are. And I'm like, well, my watch is dead. I'm crying. My watch is dead. I blah, 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 blah. She's like, you're a lot closer than you think. And I think you're going to be really proud of yourself if you can get to Sedona before the cutoff. I'm like, is that even possible? She's like, it is possible. We're a lot closer than you think. So we start hiking. And there's no running going on here, but it's not long before we drop out of the woods and into the streets, the road.
Yeah.
And now we're in downtown and we're walking through Sedona. I do a time check with her and she says, we're just gonna make the cutoff. We're just gonna get there in time. And for anyone that doesn't know, the way cutoffs work is you have to leave the aid station by the cutoff time, not arrive. You have to
Right.
leave. But just as a sense of pride, she's like, let's just get there on time. And as we're walking and as we're, you're in city streets, you're stopping at stoplights and stuff. I'm trying to sit down. She's like not letting me sit down. Um, I said to her, because I kind of prepped her on what the race command had told me, what the race director told me. I said, can you call him? Can you call Steve? And she did. She called Steve and we're walking and we get to Sedona and I literally get there within seconds of the cutoff. Obviously, I'm
Awesome.
not leaving within seconds of the cutoff. I'm just arriving. I still feel like I have a big choice to make, right? Because I know that I can't go on. It doesn't matter that I made the cutoff. I missed the cutoff technically. I'm in DNF mode at this point because I just can't physically, emotionally continue. They have the conversation and he says to Angela, put him in a car and I want you to drive him to Munns Park. So it's actually two aid stations away, but not a super long distance away. It's about a 20-mile distance between Sedona and Munns Park. So take him up to Munns Park. Don't give him any choices. Don't let him make any decisions. Just get him to bed, put him to sleep, right? I get up there to Munns Park. I have a huge plate of food. I get my feet worked on by an EMT for the first time. And you
Oh,
have to you have to understand the way that the cutoffs are organized at Cocodona is they're very tight and very difficult for a slow person at the beginning of the race. And toward the back end of the race, particularly starting at Munds Park, they're very generous.
oh,
So
okay.
I arrived there at like 3 p.m. and the cutoff is 1 a.m. So I've got plenty of time to do the one thing that I haven't been able to do, which is sleep, because I lost that time at the beginning of the race. And so I eat a big plate of food, I get my feet worked on, I take a 2 hour nap. I call my friend who's a race director and I explain the whole situation. And I'm still debating in my mind if I'm going to DNF or not. What I don't know at this point is that Steve, the race director, is texting Angela and saying, after he wakes up, kick his ass out of there because I want to see him at the finish line. Like this is not a question. It's not a question if he's continuing or not.
Yeah.
So they're plotting, and I don't even realize they're plotting for me to continue. But I'm starting to feel a little bit better. I call my friend and I said, like, what do you think? Like, is this legit? Is this like, is there an asterisk here that I missed this section? Should I just quit? And I'm very, very fortunate that my friend, without any hesitation, said, no, you must take the finish. I'm like, as a race director, do you think this is normal? Is this a take the finish? You're going to regret it for the rest of your life if you don't take this finish. If you can do it, do it. I go back outside. I have a full plate of food again. I go back inside. I sleep another hour. I get hooked up with my pacer and we leave at 9 p.m. with the cutoff being at 1 a.m. So that is the buffer that I needed. And it's also the sleep that I needed. And I continued the race. And of course, confounded all the people who were following me because there's a moment in time where I'm like traveling at 40 miles an hour when I'm in a
Yeah.
car.
Yeah.
And everyone assumes I'm out and then I miss the cutoff. And then I get to Munns and I'm there for 5 hours or something. And then I continue and I'm still in the race. And I'm looking back at those Facebook posts that you were putting out and I'm just like cracking up, like, oh my gosh, this must have been so confusing and hilarious.
That's
But it
why
really is.
that's why watching these races is more fun than watching paint dry.
Yeah, exactly. It really is a story of like two halves because from this point on, I'm still sleep deprived, but I'm doing so much better, and I'm getting through these additional aid stations and additional nights with pacers. There was never a point where I didn't have a pacer from this point throughout the race. So I was never alone again. And I'm not just beating the cutoffs by 5 minutes, but I'm managing to beat the cutoffs by 2 and 3 hours, which is that gift that I got back from the race director.
And you're around other runners.
I'm around other runners, which is crazy because now
Yeah.
I've moved from like last place to 20th from the back instead of not 20th from the front, 20th from the
Right.
back. Keep in mind, there's like 300 people in this race, but I'm around other runners. The aid stations are lively. There's all kinds of people around, right? It's like it's a totally different experience than that initial Monday through Thursday cutoff chasing experience. It was still incredibly difficult. It was still very challenging the final night, getting up and over Mount Eldon with my pacer Brian, who was amazing. He's Flagstaff native. He's climbed Mount Eldon multiple times. So um, it was still really tough. I look back at my plan, Herb, my meticulous, formula spreadsheet plan, and I was estimated on that plan to finish the race at 6:14 a.m. on Saturday morning. That was the plan. And I finished at 6 a.m., 6:10, something like that, Saturday morning.
Really, that
Yep,
close.
that close. So that's the gift that I was given. And when I finished the race, I'm just very, 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 very tired, obviously. So I don't, the finish line feels are there, but it's not like euphoria because I'm like kind of in a daze. But I had a chance to talk with the race director. I get my buckle and everything. And what I love about this race and this organization, Aravaipa and Steve specifically, is there are three races going on. You have the Cocodona 250, you have the Sedona Canyons 125, you have the Eldon Crest 38 or whatever it is. There's roughly 900 people that started those three races,
Uh-huh.
but he knows who I am. And he said, I really want you to know that missing that segment does not bother us. And I hope it doesn't bother you. And you are an official Coco their own journey out here, and this was your journey this year. Here's your buckle. Congratulations. Um, and yeah, on reflection, I'm just incredibly grateful. I did something I never thought I could do. Um, I think for those in the audience doing math, I had about 10 bonus miles from getting lost, and I lost about 20 miles, 22 miles from that segment. So I don't know. I ran like the Cocodona 235 or something like that, or the two Cocodona 240 or something. But ultimately, at the end of the day, how it shook out. Unfortunately, I don't have any data from my watch because my watch died on me, but I'm really grateful. I'm really happy. Since we are on video, I will show you
Oh,
my,
awesome.
my awesome buckle. Yeah, I got a lot of great swag, but I'm very proud of the buckle. And
I think
yeah, that's my tale.
that's so incredible. I know from doing a lot of races and being a race director myself, there's there's always shit that happens during races. Certain people have uh, events that happen and things and to have someone have the flexibility and to allow you to continue on because on something like that for you're running for several days.
Hmm.
um uh I mean, you did it.
I did it. Yeah. It
You
not
did it.
only
You
did
might have done
they,
it. You did it a little bit differently than other people.
yes.
I mean, there's 300 other people out there with 300 different stories,
Hmm.
and some of them did some pretty weird things along the way too. So,
Yeah,
uh,
lots of people got lost. Even the pros get lost. On reflection, now that I've heard several people talk about their experience from the pros to just average Joes like myself, um, it's been encouraging because I'm now a little bit more than a week out from the finish, and I still have quite a bit of brain fog. This morning was the first day that I wore shoes,
wow,
and that's been the primary fallout for me. And this again is just a huge testament to Alicia Brower, who was my coach. Over all those miles, I never cramped once. I never had any muscle fatigue per se. That kind of altitude when you're a flatlander, like, when you're up in flag is challenging. But the issues that I had on the course were sleep deprivation was number one,
right,
and my feet were number two. So my really, really well, but there is no solve for kicking rocks. And I kicked 10 million rocks, and I wound up with multiple blisters underneath multiple toenails that grew and grew and grew and got massive. So um, that has been my recovery so far since I've been home, has just been like a level of fatigue that I have never experienced before, combined with a lot of brain fog,
yeah,
um, and caring for my feet, trying to get my feet back in shape. There, to this day, this is Monday. It's been like a week and 2 days or whatever since I finished the race. I still have a lot of foot issues, so
yeah,
it's going to be a while before I run again.
yeah. But that obviously leads to the big question: do you want to do it again?
Oh man. I would, in an alternate universe, I would do this race again next year. But in my universe, where I live with my family and my priorities as they are, you can imagine that doing something like this, kind of a solo, selfish endeavor, is very self-absorbing for more than a year of training, and a lot of sacrifices were made by my family. So what I am looking at right now is twofold. Number one, I'm going to be very, very conscious of not specifically sacrificing other things so that I can train for a goal, at least for 12 months. I'm going to give myself a year off from that kind of intense, focused training. I will, of course, jump into the random Ole Trail Runners race here and there just to test my fitness and have fun and come out to the group runs. But the other thing that I would really love to do, and I'm going to call it a plan, as far as you can plan out a year in advance, is I want to be out there next year to pace and crew somebody else. Because the
Oh,
gift that I was given was so instrumental in my finish. I'm confident I could not have done this solo. I could not have finished by myself. And now that I know the value of a pacer for encouragement, for navigation, and just for freaking keeping you alive and getting you to the finish line, I want to give that gift back. So I would love to be back at Cocodona next year to pace, to crew, to do whatever I can to help someone else the way that I got helped.
oh, that sounds great. Yeah, I highly recommend pacing. It's a lot of fun. You're kind of in there, no pressure, in one sense, and a lot of pressure because this other person's counting on you
Yeah,
at the
exactly.
same time. And
Yeah.
then,
Imagine how slow they'd have to be if I was their pacer.
yeah, yeah, I have to,
So
yeah, yeah. I love the name of your podcast, Chasing Cutoffs, because you're the back the packer guy chasing cutoffs the whole time, and but
yeah.
but you figure out how to get it done. That's what counts.
Yeah, I like to say that I run at the back of the pack, right? I'm like way back there. But yeah, I appreciate that very much. And I had to take a hiatus from the show. That was again another thing that I had to sacrifice because I just between my super high pressure job and family stuff and then the Cocodona training, which was, 9 solid months. I took a break from the podcast, but now hoping to get that back up and running here shortly and do another season of episodes and really looking forward to that. And yeah, just very grateful to share my story with you.
Yeah, well, fantastic. Thanks so much, Ben. You're truly an inspiration. Like I said, we had a lot of fun following your little dot on the map as it meandered all over the place. And
Yeah, shout out to all the Ole Trail runners who were obsessing over that on Facebook. I love it. Thank you for all the encouragement and all the kind words.
oh yeah, yeah, you're really it's really fantastic you pulled that off. And yeah, looking forward to you seeing you out on the trails again, and also checking out your podcast. So thanks so much, and we'll see everyone in our next episode.
Thanks, Herb.
See ya.